Hey guys, what's going on? This is Roth with Eric. Welcome to Watchers on the Wall.
Watchers on the Wall.
Da-na-na-na-na-na. Let's talk about the premiere episode of Game of Thrones Season 5.
Yeah. Full spoilers.
Full spoilers,
yeah.
So if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it, then come back and join us. It'll be fun. I, once again, am representing House Alcohol.
Yeah.
With a little Game of Thrones beer, and he's being Eric with
Fifth
water.
Fifth vodka.
So let's talk a little bit about just your general thoughts. Mm-hmm. Were you happy with the start of the season?
No, I liked it a lot. You know, it's like like a lot of big shows that get bigger as they go on. There's always sort of a little bit of a catch up and a little bit of like, not resetting, but you know, you kind of want to put people back. Game of Thrones premieres are rarely like just hit the ground running, because there's a lot of like, let's remind you of what's going on and where these people are, even through dialogue.
Right.
Like there's a little more than usual. Like, let's remind you what happened by speaking it out loud again. Like, oh, and then I happen to have just killed, my father.
So remember the fact that our dad is dead?
Right,
Let's have a discussion about that right here over his corpse.
Yeah, but no, I liked it a lot. I was really intrigued by a lot of the things going on. We were right before we were recording, I was saying how it was a moment that struck me that really stuck out was when Jon was summoned to see Stannis, because it was like they kind of purposely, they're like, oh, look, it's the Wall, and they're training to fight. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, the king wants to see you right now. And like, oh, yeah, Stannis is there with them.
Right, and that's going to change these dynamics quite a little bit.
That changes everything about what life is like at the Wall for them.
Yeah, and I think it also serves as a good reminder that even at the Wall, this place where they're supposed to be like separated from the politics of the lands.
Right.
Politics is still very much a part of their reality, not just in terms of Stannis being there, but the inner workings of their politics.
Yeah.
They need a new commander.
They do need a new commander.
You know?
And even there was like that part where he's even being told, Jon, that a lot of people are very fond of you and a lot of people hate you, basically. Yeah. It's like it's everyone's kind of vying for position no matter where they are.
No matter where they are,
yeah.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of big decisions that need to be made now that this big battle is over. I think that's another thing that I like about this particular type of storytelling. It's like, well, once the battle is over, then still there's stuff to do.
There's still plenty
to do.
There's
still plenty to do. They got to figure out who's on what side, and that was what that conversation was about. You know, Stannis is positioning himself to go back now and continue his campaign for the Iron Throne, and he would like Mance's assistance.
Yeah, that doesn't work out.
It doesn't work out for anyone in that scenario.
Yeah,
that just sucks for everyone.
Yeah, and though I did like it was it's Jon being the last thing we have left to sort of a classic hero.
Yeah.
Him giving Mance that mercy killing. That was Stannis was not going to grant him. He wanted to hear him scream and have him die. That was a nice moment.
I thought that was a great show of respect and care and compassion from him, but also leaves you with some questions like, well, Stannis is probably not going to like that move very much.
Probably won't love that. No.
So interesting things afoot at the Wall.
Yeah.
We open again. We'll touch on this a little more later, but we saw our first flashback.
Yeah.
I liked it. I also liked that it wasn't like you had to sort of figure it out. It didn't let you know. I mean, you knew. I kind of knew right away.
Some people I think would know, but there was questions there because I was like, when it first began, you're like, where is this happening?
Yeah.
And then you start to sort of realize like who this probably is.
Yeah.
But it was kind of interesting look. I mean, even the fact that it was almost a throwback to have these two young girls kind of remind you of like the Stark girls or whatnot when the show began in this world that we know is so adult and insane and dangerous,
Well, she's got a very adult attitude for a little girl.
She did. Not the friendliest little girl, not making friends.
No.
You're boring.
She's a little like the bad seed. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but Cersei. But still very much her nature is her nature, which I like. We see the prediction. We'll talk about that a little bit more. What do you think of the prediction? I think the fact that they chose that to be the very first thing that we see, I think sets it up as a very important theme throughout the rest of the season, which it is.
Yeah, it was certainly notable that it seemed to be implying that all her kids were doomed. She's down one, If it didn't seem to sound like things would be great for her other two kids, too.
It does not sound that way, but the interesting thing is like, well, how
the
reliable?
wording is shaky, yeah. And the wording is shaky. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, maybe that doesn't mean exactly what it sounds like.
Sounds like it means, and maybe this isn't such a reliable source.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know if I'd trust like random psychic in the woods, you know?
I certainly do.
Right.
But it's a nice thing that it leaves you with that question, but still an ominous sense.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about her interactions with Jamie.
Yeah.
It's the weirdest thing that you kind of have to feel for him as a man with his lover.
His sister lover.
Sister lover.
Yeah.
That's the oddest thing about their, well, the oddest thing about their relationship is the fact that they are lovers and twins.
Right.
But the thing is, you have so much compassion for Jamie as someone who's clearly so in love with someone who isn't at the moment really returning that affection. And she just cuts him down and makes him feel so small.
Yeah.
And he's done this thing that she's going to, by letting their brother go, who she detests so heartily and thinks killed her son. She's going to make him pay at every turn, and he's right. You know, like the world is going to try and tear us apart, and you're letting them.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously she never had compassion for Tyrion at all.
No.
So it's easy for her to just completely, I mean, because you know Jamie's got to feel all messed up because he does love Tyrion, but he also had a relationship with his father and didn't want his father killed, even though that was a troubled relationship itself.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you do feel for Jamie because it's there's no right answer here for him. He didn't want to keep he wanted to let his brother die.
Yeah.
But then he set his brother free, and his brother killed his father.
Right,
so.
and she's just kind of like, your stupidity killed him, not our stupid little brother.
Right.
That's her words.
Right.
And they're not quite her words. So let's talk about Tyrion. We've talked previously that there are a lot of great team-ups on this show, and one that I'm liking already is Varys and Tyrion.
They'd had moments together.
They have, but
But now they're off on their own.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting, and to see like, you know, even their little disagreements there, and the fact that Tyrion being his sort of surly self, you know, having lost everything, understandably surly, and having been locked in a crate. But, you know, there's now this sort of like new potential mission brought up, you know, with him saying to Tyrion, look, you know, you're never going to be on the throne, and Stannis is too harsh, but who's out there maybe?
That we could like together. And it's interesting, and I like the fact that he's sort of pitching him not just on Daenerys as the queen, but pitching him on himself as a man who can rise to the occasion and do what needs to be done for the greater good.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that that's how Tyrion sees himself, and I certainly don't think that's how he sees himself right now. He just wants to drink himself to death. He's depressed.
He's not seeing any of his own positive attributes, you know. But
He's not,
but you know, it's a great point about like, you have accomplished a lot and you have these strengths, and then look, we've talked before about it's so exciting on this show because the characters are so separated to have them come together, or the potential for them to come together. We've all seen the poster to season 5. With it, which is Tyrion looking at that dragon,
which gives you a big hint about where he's headed.
Right. Well, I mean, they say like, you know, she's Dany is like his possibility there to help sort of get her there. Something we've all wanted is for her to get to Westeros.
Yeah, and I think that it's going to be interesting to see his take on her.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it will be what any of us would think. Well,
yeah,
we'll
just the idea of seeing them on camera together is exciting for me. You know.
And then finally, let's talk about her a little bit. A little bit of trouble in Paris. You know, she's come in, she's taken down this big symbol of slavery, and yet, again, we've talked about this before, that does not mean that all the problems are solved. She certainly has a lot to deal with. There, you know, one of her unsullied, and that was a really tragic scene.
That was.
All he wanted to do was be
held, and then you're in Game of Thrones, buddy. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. That means your throat is getting a moment of vulnerability, slit throat. Yeah. So we've got another player in the field, which is the Sons of the Harpy. It's going to be a lot for her to deal with.
Yeah, and then meanwhile, she's got this whole thing of the fighting pits and the idea of, hey, you know, you've taken a lot from what was these people's lifestyle, so give them back this, and how hard that is for her because she's being asked to put back something she finds reprehensible, but you know, finding that balance because she's already taken away slavery. Which I think we're all on board with that being the right move.
Yes.
But the fighting pits thing is it like, you know, you can't take everything from these people, what their life was. You have to give them this back at least. And what the struggle that is for her to have to make that decision.
And I think that what's interesting about what she's being faced with is that it's similar to Ned in the sense that, like, you can stick to your guns and your sense of morality 100%. We're going to see how that goes for you. It's probably going to be pretty rough. If you're going to be the queen, that is a political position as well, and you are going to have to make some choices and political moves. What are they going to be? You're going to have to make some compromises. But right now, she is just unrelenting in her. And I'm not saying she's wrong. I'm just saying it's going to be a rough road if you're going to try to stick to your guns quite that much. One more player in the field is the Sparrows. Very interesting little look at fundamentalist religion in this world.
A reminder that Cersei was sleeping with her cousin a couple seasons ago, you know, in between sleeping with her brother. It's like, don't forget, she's very friendly with her family.
And he comes in as having seen the light for as he sees it, enjoying this sort of, I don't want to call it a cult. Seems kind of like a cult. But certainly a highly religious organization, and wants to have a very direct conversation with her about being somewhat culpable in the murderish of the king. It wasn't a murder, it was murderish.
I like the word.
So that's not something she's going to be fond of discussing. She's just going to immediately deny having any knowledge of what he's talking about. But clearly, this is going to be a thing that is significant in the season.
And there's a lot of reminders also, we should say, back in King's Landing of like who's supposed to marry who. And, you know, Marjorie now, you know, with Joffrey dead, it's like, oh, you're going to marry his brother. But then Cersei is supposed to marry Marjorie's brother, you know?
Who is busy sleeping with his...
Oliver.
Yes, with his lover, to which Marjorie says, you need to watch it.
Which was kind of a fun scene for Marjorie as far as like, you know, just kind of walks in, is like, you know, all right, let's talk about this, you know?
There's certainly an interesting enmity between Marjorie and Cersei as well, and that played out, of course, last season. But now Marjorie's really going to be in more of the power position. Because... she's
once again could be queen,
and Cersei is just queen mother. Just not quite queen.
No. And then we got some little looks. We got Sansa and Littlefinger, and you know, a little more about, you know, what's going on with them and that sort of twisted dynamic, you know.
And he has become like he was last season, her mentor. And that sort of, you know, he says he's taking her away, which is a big change, but he's taking her away to where Cersei can't even reach her. Where is that? We have to ask. I don't know. But you let us know what you think. I mean, there's plenty of possibilities, and certainly there's some hints from what we've seen in the trailers that we can speculate on, and you can speculate on in the comments below. But now we're going to dig in a little bit more on the flashback. Because one of the things that was predicted in the flashback is, of course, this younger, prettier queen is going to come and take everything away from you. Not only was the prediction, yes, you will be queen, your kids are going to die, that's going to suck. But also there's this younger, prettier queen. Right now, it looks like that's definitely Marjorie.
I mean, that would be the obvious thing to go to. But it's not the only possibility in this universe or this show. But it's not the only possibility, and I think that probably because it is the most obvious possibility, it will not be the one. If that whole prediction is true, then that will not be the simple answer. Maybe for a period of time it will be, but ultimately, who are the other options? It could be Daenerys. That's obviously another sort of second obvious one, because we know that she is a big sort of player potentially coming for that throne out there. And but then you also have to go back to Sansa, who right now is not using her name, but we know who she is, and it's like, she's out there in the world, and could she sort of get her way back into power? Certainly, that is a possibility.
And it's one that I kind of like, actually. I think that the trajectory of that would be pretty ironic and sweet justice for Cersei, because because of the way that everything played out, and that she was originally headed toward that position.
With Joffrey.
But also because, again, it's not quite, we've talked about this a lot before, like, he's not heading us towards some happy ending. A severely damaged and manipulative and evilified Sansa turning up as queen is not really a happy ending for anyone.
No.
Not for her.
It's happy for evil.
It's happy for evil.
Right.
Evil will win the day. Evil wins the day a lot in this world.
Yeah. I mean, we'll have other discussions, I'm sure, as we go on about like how this whole thing will end. And yeah, I don't think it'll be a traditional, and they lived happily ever after. I think we all know that's not happening. It could be some sort of twisted version of that, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely another possibility.
There's one other possibility that I'm sure there's plenty of other possibilities.
Yeah.
So there's one that I'm thinking of that I'll mention in our book spoiler section.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a little specific, but yeah.
But just in general, let's talk about the flashbacks. Did you like the use of it? Do we want to see?
Yeah.
We're going to see more of it.
It was interesting because, you do think about this when you're in year 5 of a TV show to suddenly start using flashbacks when it's just not part of the show's language.
Right.
It's a notable thing to do. I did like it. I don't think it could become like all the time. I don't think it should be lost all of a sudden where it's like this is structurally part of the show. But as a little glimpse and like giving you a little backstory, a little idea of where, in this case Cersei, where this character came from, what she was, I did think it was cool. Look, just as the same way they can't start introducing a million new characters at this point because there's so much to cover, you couldn't do a million flashbacks.
You couldn't do a million flashbacks. I think that this served a very specific story purpose because otherwise you would just have to tell the story of like, remember when I was a little kid and I went to see the Lady in the Woods and this is what she said to me? I don't think that's as effective as seeing it happen to this little child.
No, and even last year, I mean, was it last year? I believe it was, when it wasn't quite the same, but there was sort of that trippy brand sequence that used footage from the pilot, I think, with Ned and stuff, and even that was very effective as far as like looking back at what things were, how things had changed for these characters, both physically and just their lives. So yeah, when you use it in that sort of way, I think it can be very powerful. And because we talked about Cersei, it's interesting because Cersei, is such a harsh woman, and those flashbacks did reiterate she's always been like that. She was nasty, but at the same time, she's not 100% like she's not like her Joffrey. You see, there's some damage in there. You see like sort of some of her own pain.
Right.
So. Even if you were a cruel little girl, still being told that prophecy is like you still have some idea of where she's coming from.
Absolutely.
The idea that she has desperately been trying to fight that off,
and that she's been desperate to protect her children from day one, which maybe even reveals a little bit about why she is such a mother lion, where the only place that, and it's interesting because
how mother lion almost sounded like mother effer.
Yeah.
I think for her words.
Well,
she is such a mother lion.
She is both.
Yeah.
She like, the thing is like.
And brother.
And
and cousin.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well,
Yes.
well, anyway. It's interesting because another person could have gone the other way and decided just not to love their kids.
Right.
But she decided to fight for them, which is actually endears us to her. I think a little. It endears me to her a little bit.
At least gives you an angle on her where she has love in her. Like Joffrey didn't seem to have love for anyone or anything, including her. So at least you see like, okay, we understand her as a character, even if we're rooting against her. We don't want her to win, but you can see where she's coming from a certain perspective, or at least in parts of her life.
And I kind of feel like that each of these flashbacks will be significant. Like, I think that we should watch them very carefully because I think that they're all going to be hinting at very significant themes or elements of the story, you know? Like, they're not going to be used just as a tool because it's easier to do it with a flashback.
There's going to be that one where Tyrion's like, spring break! And he's just like drinking.
And that's the best one.
Yeah. It's usually the last 10 seconds. That's going to be it. But the rest are going to be very...
The rest are going to be very significant.
Yes.
That one's very significant. I don't know what you're talking about. This is Game of Drinks.
Game of Drinks.
We request that you drink responsibly.
Yes. But possibly while you're watching, possibly not.
Possibly not.
Yeah.
Our show will be that much better if you're having apple juice.
It's already great. Yeah.
So we're going to move on from that and we're going to take some questions from the social sphere.
The world of social media.
The world of social sphere. This one is
How much have you drank?
I had like a sip. I had a sip and was like suddenly hammered. That's so sad. I do like the fact that she is constantly drinking.
Oh, Cersei?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
constantly.
There's a little bit of absolutely fabulous in her.
Like she's always got a glass of wine in her hand, and it's funny because that is what she and her brother that could bond her and
It's like
Tyrion.
Cougar Town.
They could just be drunkards together. They could bond by the holy glass of wine, but
There you
no.
go.
All right, so Lucas at Ricky G asks, is Game of Thrones the best television series on HBO since The Sopranos? Thoughts?
Well, and I did make sure to double check these years and all. Probably, I mean, for some people that answer is yes.
So is it since The Sopranos began
or
or since
ended?
The Sopranos ended? Because this is a very key factor.
Yeah.
I think.
Let's say since it began.
Okay.
Let's just make it, let's at least start off.
Okay.
So Sopranos began in 99. Is this the best show HBO's had since that in 99? And the thing that stops it from being an absolute yes is The Wire.
Yes.
Which, to me, might be the best TV show ever. Certainly up there in, like, I'd say the top 5. An absolutely fantastic show. And again, kind of going back to even last week with the Breaking Bad question, there is the fact that we need to see the end of Game of Thrones. Because while there's no reason, I have no reason to think it's not going to be a great show till the end. What if the last couple years are not good? Who knows? So you have to see the complete thing. Right now it's been amazing, but when I look back at what The Wire accomplished as an overall show, I'd still say, like, just choose one. Even though I hate doing that, and why would I? Because they're both great. I would say The Wire edges it out. But
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because, to your point, I don't necessarily think I thought about this the other day. Does everything hinge on how this thing ends?
no.
And I don't think that it does.
No.
I think so often with television shows, we act as if everything does hinge on that, and if we're a little bit disappointed in how it ends, which honestly inevitably will be.
And I totally agree with that. Yeah, it should never be about, like, oh, this 1 hour of TV defines years
of
TV.
it. Or anything, any
Yeah.
story. Although there's some stories with some great endings, but I think inevitably it's not going to end the way that you imagined it, and so that's going to lead to a little bit of disappointment.
It'll be hard for it to end the way that you, right now, if you were to say, describe your satisfying end of Game of Thrones, well, some people might describe what the ending is, but many will not,
But you're right in that there's still several years to go of this. At least 2, probably 3.
Beyond, we're in season 5, and we've heard through season 7 for sure.
For sure,
Yeah.
and I would guess
I think 8's a strong
that you're going to get
possibility.
8.
Yeah.
I would guess that there's not much beyond that, but 8 seasons of this show.
Yeah.
So we'll know then, but I would say, probably The Wire. But it's a great show.
Yeah.
I mean,
again, I understand, like, the which one wins thing is hard, and we all do it. I do it, But yeah, if me saying that I think The Wire would still be, like, the best HBO show since Sopranos is not saying anything bad about Game of Thrones, which is one of my absolute favorite shows right now and probably ever, listing. And I have no reason to think that Game of Thrones won't stay excellent till the end. It's just, you just don't want to make those predictions, because we haven't seen the last few years of the show.
let's move on to another question. This is actually a little bit harder. Eleanor Wales on Facebook asks us, who are your favorite characters?
Arya.
It's probably the really obvious ones for me. I think it's Arya, it's Tyrion, it's Daenerys for me, but it's often Daenerys in potentiality, if that makes sense. I think she is a really interesting character, but I think she has the potential to become a fascinating character.
Right.
Whether that is, like our colleague Jim believes, a turn to the dark side, or a triumph or whatever it is. I think she does have that potentiality to be a fascinating character, but I think that Arya right now is a fascinating character and continues to be. But the truth is they all are, because a lot of times there's so many hidden depths that we then reveal themselves that we thought happened with Jaime.
Oh, yeah.
We're seeing it happen with Sansa right now. Brienne's a fascinating character. I mean, it's very tough to pick, because it's often about the moment that they're having.
Oh yeah, and then year to year, season to season, and episode to episode, even it's like, oh, now we're kind of getting a new look, new insight into this person that opens it up. In the totality of the show we've seen so far, Arya is my favorite, followed by Tyrion, just because, I just love where they've taken her. I love the sort of grit and quirkiness of her attitude, the humor when they want to go to the humor, but then, like, the absolute belief that she can be that lethal. It doesn't
Yeah.
come off as like goofy or
Fake.
Yeah, fake it
You
all.
buy it all.
Yeah.
And that's like about the marriage of the actress and the character.
Right. She's so perfect, Maisie Williams.
She is so perfect in that role that you're able to believe that from her, that this little girl is killing people left and right and center. And
Yeah.
she just likes it so much.
Right, because I mean, it easily could play very false and be like, oh, that's a young actress pretending she's tough.
Yeah,
But you completely buy into it.
I think that the part of me that would like to be a person that works for the greater good, I don't know that I do because I cover geek genre stuff about TV and movies, so I'm not sure that I'm actually doing that, likes Varys.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, because I don't know that he's making the right choices or not for the realm, but I like the idea that that's genuinely what's motivating him. You know, he's not motivated by sexual desire. He can't be. He's not motivated like Littlefinger by trying to reach an unattainable position for himself.
Right.
He knows that he's never going to be on the throne himself.
there's no
I
chance
don't think
of that.
Littlefinger gets that totally. I think he thinks there's a shot. So you're telling me there's a shot,
Maybe,
you know?
maybe there is.
And maybe there is
Yeah.
a shot for him, that's the truth. But I think that Varys, whether he's right or whether he's wrong, is trying to make the best decision for everyone.
Right.
And that's pretty noble to me. And there's actually not a lot of people that are coming from that noble of a place. And so one thing that I love about that character is that it took time to get to the point that you understood that kind of nobility about him, because he's also very willing and able to do less than totally integrous things to get to reach that goal.
And I would say
which is the difference from Ned Stark.
I'm not even like, I will say this, I think you're more completely sold on his intentions than I am, but because I'm like, what if he's still kind of grifting? But I like that, A, it certainly leans that way, like you're saying, and that B, I like that they have changed him so much, you know, that you can even see this as a possibility.
Yeah.
Whereas at the beginning, it's just like, oh, he's just pulling strings, he's just trying to mess with people.
Spider.
Yeah, but now you're like, oh, wait, no, actually, it sounds like this is the real him that we're seeing with Tyrion. And maybe that's not true, but I think it probably is. But yeah, it's really cool to see where they've taken him. And then you mentioned Jamie, too, who, you know, started out the show as just kind of one of the villains. That really, again, you mentioned the premiere episode ends with him pushing a kid out of a window.
Yeah.
Hard to come back from, and yet they've found a way. You know, the stuff with him and Brienne, was that season 3 especially?
So good.
Was so good, and such a different insight into him. I kind of miss that on-screen rapport.
I do too.
You know, it's one sort of sad thing when the show kind of shifts on to a different pairing, because that brought out such a different side of him.
And my hope is that we'll see more of that with him. So other people will bring out sides to Jamie. But yeah, he's been one of the surprising characters that you have so much empathy for. You do have to remember that this is a guy that did toss a kid out of a window, but it's not a perfect world.
There you go.
It's not a perfect
world. No one's perfect.
No one's perfect, and that's what we've learned about the Game of Thrones. Who are your favorite characters on the Game of Thrones? Let us know. You can tweet at us, leave it in comments, things like that. Yeah, I mean, hey, who doesn't love Arya? I guess there are people that don't, but you should.
People with wrong decisions.
But you should. People that are wrong. So let's talk about, we're going to talk about the books now a little bit. You know, if you have not read them, well, then you shouldn't watch this.
Yeah. This is definitely, this is where we're going to go into some sort of full spoilers for the most recent books in relation, and specifically one thing I want to talk about in relation to this premiere. So, you can bow out now. This will be our last
warning.
Last warning, but also last section of this conversation. It's,
yes.
The book one. Okay.
Okay, so let's just talk about one thing very specifically that was, there were a few things that were big differences that we were already starting to see in this episode, but perhaps the biggest one is Mance. Now, they've talked about people are going to die on the show that are still alive in the books.
And it already happened last season with one of the Reeds. But this time, even more so, because Mance, I think we all have been assuming in the books, could still play a pretty big role. And so for Mance to apparently actually die, and it to not be the rattle shirt fake out, is pretty notable.
It's very notable.
Yeah.
It leads us to all kinds of questions, and we had a previous show just sort of introing the season, and one of the things that we talked about was certain things that George R.R. Martin is writing in the book, seemingly now, if they're not going to take place in the show, then we're irrelevant.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, because certain things is fine. Like you have collapsed certain characters, you get that.
Yeah.
That's just part of an adaptation.
Yeah.
But this seems like a thing that we thought was probably pretty significant, but it's not.
Right, because in the book, it's sort of such a big deal that Melisandre switches out Mance with Rattleshirt, and that and who gets the same death basically, except Jon has archers. He doesn't do it just himself.
Right.
His archers kill him, sort of in a mercy thing. But then it's this reveal to Jon, like, oh no, actually this is Mance. He's alive. We got to get Mance out of here. And so you're like, oh, so what will happen with Mance later?
Right.
For them to just kill him now on the show is like, yeah, you're kind of like, oh, I guess the books don't, I mean, I guess whatever's happening with the books is not, it might be big, but it's not endgame big. It's not needed there at the end, you know?
And that sort of seems to be all of the decisions that they're making.
Yeah.
Is like, let's streamline everything so that we can drive towards this end. And again, we just talked about how, well, not everything should rest on the ending. I mean, there's so much in the show. We just talked about the turns the characters have made, the ways that we've gotten to know them, the way that you can gain sympathy for somebody that you thought you never could.
Right.
You could learn things about a character that you had no idea were there initially. And this is a really rich world. So if the ending isn't good, that will still be true. We hope the ending's good.
Yeah.
But it does seem to me like, and we've talked about this before, because books 4 and 5 that this season is based on don't have that propulsive feel quite as much, that I think they are trying to create more of a propulsive feel by streamlining things.
Right, streamlining it and making things, upping the stakes a little bit and having something like that happen that really does take Mance out. We should allow for the fact, because people I know you're going to bring up in the comments, yes, they could still do it. They could still have 3 episodes from now, Melisandre be like, hey, I swapped him out. That wasn't Mance. But I don't think so, based on the way they played it.
I really don't think so, based on the way they played it and based on the way that they warned us ahead of time that, like, listen, people really are going to die that you think, if you're a book reader, that you think are still alive.
Yeah.
They're going to be dead.
And I also think that maybe the show is doing, in bigger terms, maybe they're scaling back some of the supernatural magic element that the books were also slow to introduce.
Yeah.
But I still think that when you talk about, we talked about, like, we still haven't seen Lady Stoneheart, and Bran is out for now. He will be back.
Training, doing his magical training.
Doing magical training. So again, they're not ignoring it. It's part of the world.
Right.
But right now, I think they're scaling it back, and you could say maybe that's just the feel of the show. Maybe some of it's budgetary, but I don't know. I think it's just that's the way the show is approaching it. And so for this shapeshifter thing to happen, or for her to enchant people to see some other guy as Mance, again, they've done some crazy magic stuff on the show, but I think maybe they don't want to do as much of it, or the show's just not delving into it in quite as big a way as the books do.
Yeah. I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
If to me, ultimately, whatever's going to serve this story best, and they're having, and I believe that they know what that is. I trust these creators. So, David Benioff and T.B. Weiss. So, if he needed to die, he needed to die.
And again, on the show's terms, it was a good death. Like it worked. Like we said earlier, it's like we really liked Jon doing that. The moment for Jon, which obviously was important because he did spend time with these people, with Mance, and did have respect for them, even though ultimately he was going to stay true to who he was.
Yeah.
It worked for me. And you got to believe if they did take Mance out now, they know it's because Martin's not going to shock them. And in the final book, Mance is like integral, the most important part of the final chapter.
He's sitting on the Iron Throne.
Right. Oh, man. I forgot to mention that to you guys.
Mance on the Iron Throne. Next week, maybe we'll do, I don't think that we will do our predictions about how the whole thing is going to end just yet. But
we'll
maybe for the final podcast of the season, we'll do a whole section on that. I don't know yet. I'm predicting a lot of things that may or may not ever happen. Hey, let us know what you think in the comments below about the episode, about Mance seemingly actually being dead. The flashbacks, did you like it? All things Game of Thrones. Do keep it locked right here to IGN.